Hello and welcome to Coming Out. I am your host, Gabriel Páez. Today we have Jonathan. Jonathan Welch is a well-rounded individual, but now he's an author, international author, and we're here to speak to him today about his new book, Tides Between Shores. Welcome, Jonathan. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's really good to be here. I really love seeing you, and I really love your outfit today.
Well, I thought I would,
It's so fitting,
right?
It's so nautical.
It is. I thought it was the perfect outfit for your book. It's your debut collection. I have notes today. These are my notes. These are my questions that I want to ask you about.
Well, you always do your homework, so I'm ready for you.
This is Tides Between Shores. It's between South Florida and Nantucket.
Yes, sir.
What drew you to these two places? Are you from Nantucket?
Well, Nantucket is a place I've been going to every other summer since high school. And each time I've had a different experience. And it's a place that I hold dear in my heart. Similarly, Miami, all of South Florida, is a place I hold dear in my heart. Both places called me. I think sometimes cities call you. I think many people, when they move to Miami, when you talk about it later in life, they'll tell you, Miami called me. Everybody has a Miami moment. Whether you are walking on the beach, whether you're walking along Biscayne Bay, whether you're walking through Miracle Mile or Coconut Grove or Lincoln Road, many say that their city has called them. It called me. I had a moment back in 2000 when I was in the water in Miami Beach, and I looked out and I said, is there a school here? Is there a school here? Because I want to live here. I want to be part of this. And then I made the point to go to have the UM experience because I wanted to be part of that Miami magic. Nantucket, same way. I find every time I go there, I discover something about myself. I think sometimes Miami and Nantucket are so very different. Miami, it's very flashy, it's very bright, very colorful, vibrant. Nantucket, sometimes a little colder, it's windier, a little gloomier, perhaps more conducive to introspection. And a time for solace, too. Miami has lots of buildings and lights, and sometimes you can't see the stars. There's street lights everywhere. But in Nantucket, there's no lights, especially out by Madaket or out by Sconset. No lights at all. And you better be home before it gets dark, unless you have a flashlight. If you have a flashlight, you'll be in a good place. But you see something you don't really see so much in Miami, and that's the stars.
Is Nantucket kind of like P-Town?
It's near P-Town. In fact, every time I go to Nantucket, I always make it a point, of course, to stop and to go. And I have just as many stories about P-Town as I do Nantucket. That's another book. That's another book.
Right, that one's the next book.
P-Town stories.
But your stories, kind of span a different range of time, from the 1800s to now. Why the historical range?
I thought the challenge of doing it was exciting. Capturing a whole century is a way to, I think, as a writer, kind of learn more about each era a little fully, in a deeper way. I think we have characters from the 1890s, from the 1920s. I have characters. One chapter is about two sailors in the 1890s that find love. But it's interesting about sailors from the 1890s is they didn't do something, and that was talk much. So you had to do something similar to method acting, method method writing, where you really have to get into character and do your research, find out how people talked, how they spoke back then, find out what was the news back then, what were common names, how did people pass away. And what I noticed about a lot of the sailors during the 1890s is that many sailors had a lot of trauma. Many were out on sea because their family passed from tuberculosis or something other, because they were maybe a criminal and wanted by the law, because they had nothing to lose. They were thrill seekers. Everybody has their own unique story of why they chose to be a sailor. So you had to really kind of capture,
The time frames.
the time frame, and kind of, those traumas that did exist.
So what do you want them to take away from the book?
Love, hope. It's called Tides Between Shores because you kind of just have to go where the tide leads you. Lean into things. Take a chance on chance.
Is that how you live your life?
Yes.
It's
I think I give a lot of chances, and I think
opportunities.
I'm a very patient man.
Okay.
But I think it's also because I'm very much a faith-based person, in the sense where sometimes you have to take your faith for a spin. What's the point of having a Corvette if you're just gonna keep it in the garage, collecting dust? Sometimes you have to, like faith, take it for a spin.
Right.
But later characters, even in the 1920s, I was able to capture Miami during the Great Miami Hurricane. And the 1920s was a very exciting time in Miami, between what George Merrick was doing in Coral Gables, all the immigrants that were coming from Italy, all the builders. It's also a time when the University of Miami, was founded. And I wanted...
A lot of was founded in the 25,
Yes.
26.
Yes,
That's
sir.
why we're celebrating so many centennials this
Yes,
year.
sir. Yes. And I wanted to capture Miami history in a way that from the era I always loved. I always found that era just so exciting, with the jazz and the Biltmore and everything that was going on at the time.
I find that there's a lot of queerness in your book. So are we saying Miami was was somewhat ahead of its time in the queer?
Well, not every character it has a queer experience.
Okay.
For example, the character in the 1920s Miami, he was from Nantucket that had a Miami experience. Everybody in the book is either from Miami or Fort Lauderdale, someplace in South Florida, that have a Nantucket experience. This chapter was about someone from Nantucket that had a Miami experience in the 1920s, and he was a lighthouse keeper in Key Biscayne.
Nice.
Keeping the light on during the most perilous of times. And he led a very solitary life, and you learn a lot about nature, about the plants and the fauna of Key Biscayne. I make reference to the ibis. But so that's just an example of, I think, different times throughout a century where I can kind of research and discover periods in which I really loved.
I find sometimes that these books that you read and they have a solitude and grief and stuff, it makes you really then think about your own life. Is that what led you to write this book?
Solitude is important. I think back after college, when I served in Peace Corps in South Africa.
You did not serve on the Peace Corps. You did?
Yeah, I was United States Peace Corps.
Congratulations.
And they tell you that you're going to be out here and you're going to be by yourself a lot. And a lot of people don't know what to do with themselves when they're alone like that. But they tell you, the good volunteers, they practice their language, and they do all the things that they never had the time to do, like read books. So I took that time to read all the books I never had time to read, like, Les Miserables, War and Peace.
War and Peace, I was going to say.
all of
Plenty of time,
Tolstoy,
right?
all of Tolstoy, because that was really the only time, and you can only do that stuff if you dedicate the time to do it. And finding Solitude is really a good moment to do that. But also, it's a good time to be introspective. Sometimes in Miami, you're always shaking hands, you're always double kissing, you're always at some kind of dinner every other night, and we work a lot here. So sometimes just having a time to yourself to think, it's hard to carve out. But Nantucket is a time to really find a place where it's quiet, where you can just listen to the sounds of the dunes, smell the flowers, see the stars, and for a long time just have silence. And that's a gift. And I think through silence you can learn a lot about yourself,
Most
who
definitely.
you are, what if you've been a good man during your life, what kind of goals do you want to have for the future. But you can also dream. Sometimes we act, we do, but we have to dream first. The dreaming part is the wellspring of everything else.
Okay.
Some may say I'm a dreamer,
Right.
but I'm not the only one.
Now, do you think that you continue to dream, like they say, that impossible dream, or you're more realistic dreamer?
You just want to say that. Dream the impossible dream.
Well, now that we're talking about it, but seriously, because there's sometimes that we dream and we dream.
Well, you have to, I mean, you have to, what you want, you have to put it out to the universe.
Totally.
You just have to, that's the first
so
step.
Spot on.
That's the first step. And that's why you're telling the universe, knock, knock, this is what I want. And everything else will just come after that. But if you don't dream first, nothing will come.
Now, how long did this take you to complete this mission of solitude and grief and all these stories put together?
During COVID, I was climbing up the walls.
Okay.
And I said to myself, this is a time, like during that time in Peace Corps, where I have some time alone, can't go outside, can't go to the store, can't be with friends, got a social distance. That was the time. And I said, you know what? I'm going to dedicate that time and just focus. And I did. And, I think it's important as a writer just to stay disciplined because there's so many distractions. But
you're pretty disciplined, though. You're pretty much on track all the time. And
yeah, well, I think I learned it University of Miami Rowing Club. Back when as a student, we had practice every day, Monday through Saturday, 6:30 a.m. on the water. It didn't matter how late you were out. Nobody cared if you have to be on that water, because if you have a boat of 8 and only 7 people show up, that boat can't row and nobody likes you anymore. So it's that discipline you learn kind of in your early years that you can maybe translate into something else like writing into your later years.
Do you feel this book is a reflection of your life, or is it just pretty much?
No, I think I wanted to tell other stories.
Okay.
When I get a little older,
maybe
when I get a little older, I have a lot more reflection, worth reading. No, these are stories of others that I want to help bring to life, and I find that also too, at heart, I'm a historian.
Okay.
And kind of like, remember that book, Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown?
Mm-hmm.
And remember you went on this fun adventure, but you learned a lot in the process, you learn much about the Vatican, the artwork, the statues. You learn about the Illuminati and so much more. And so readers at the end, they learn history, and they get a good lay of the land about a city that they didn't know before. So in this book, I try to capture as much as I can about Nantucket from a historical perspective, Miami from a historical perspective, and the research in getting that historical perspective was a lot of fun. And Nantucket, they're very open. They're very happy when you go into the Whaling Museum or any museum or bookstore, and you want to find some archives or try to get something that's available about the island, and it's readily available, and people are very happy to give that information to you. And living in Miami Beach, also, and having access to all our institutions, but also Googling, but also going places. Like, for example, the character in chapter 2, who lived in the lighthouse in the 1920s. I made it a point, to go to the lighthouse, feel the lighthouse, hug the lighthouse, look around, go into the water, lay out on the beach, really absorb the fauna, be part of it. So you have to really go there, immerse yourself, so you can really, write a good story. Because a story isn't just about characters, it's about capturing smells, capturing the spirit of the city, capturing an essence, and that requires kind of being with just nature.
And it's just not about writing about a story. It's about understanding the story and really living the story. So that's why you go and you hug the lighthouse, so you can feel it.
You got to paint a picture. I want to paint a literary picture. I want people to walk through Nantucket
and breathe,
smell the salt and sea, smell the dunes, smell the mud. In Sconset, when you walk down the beach in Sconset, there's seals, and that's so neat, because you're also, when you write about the seals, you capture the spirit of Sconset in a way that perhaps one couldn't, who didn't really capture those fine details. I don't want to miss the fine details, because I want to paint a picture to give respect to the cities.
And what drove you, though, to really pick Nantucket?
I think Nantucket picked me. Oh. No, I think that all of New
because the majority of us would have picked P-Town, but you picked, and I like that you're always onto something, but off to the side.
I don't want. I know,
and that's what it's always made you who you are. So
thank you. I tried to be Mr. Independent.
That's right.
But it's less crowded. I guess the main reason why it's less crowded, it's than P-Town. Sometimes you just, when you crave a little more solitude, you go a little deeper. But also the food's lovely, people are nice, and
do you see yourself relocating there?
No.
It's too slow for you?
No, it's wonderful.
Okay.
And I write about places that I love. My next book.
What is it?
I'm already 30 pages deep in it. Once you do a book, every other book becomes a little easier.
Okay.
Because you have a good routine in place. But the next one will be about Lake Tahoe.
Okay.
Another place that I love deeply. But
it snowed the other day.
I'm not going to talk about the book number 2. Let's
focus
on Tides Between Shores.
What do you hope that our LGBTQ community takes from the book? Because there's stories that we could learn from it.
Well, I think each story has its own unique kind of LGBT experience, and it kind of gives um, more depth to our history in a neat little way. You find a hidden romance in 1890s in Nantucket, two sailors. In 1890s, that was the time of Oscar Wilde, the Oscar Wilde trial. And so that was a storyline too. And if you were out, in say London, you could be put into hard labor. And so that was what they were dealing with at the time. We need to remember how hard it was back in the 1890s for a gay man at the time. Not even Oscar Wilde could get away with it. I mean, he was put in jail. He wrote a book on toilet paper while in jail and published it when he came out. A big long love letter to his lover. You gotta stay creative. But
I just find that our history is so full of challenges.
It really is.
And sometimes.
Well, there was a there is a chapter. I dwell too much on chapter 1 and 2, but there is another chapter that focuses on 1980s Miami, and you learn a lot about Anita Bryant. And I know that timeline. Many in Miami remember it and remember it well.
I was a child, but I remember it well.
And talks a lot about the HIV/AIDS crisis.
For sure.
And it goes into deep detail about a little bit of death and dying, and how it was just kind of all around you in a way that's not.
At that point, I was going to more funerals than birthdays.
There was a time, thankfully.
What is it? Mercy Hospital had a ward, HIV ward.
Mount Sinai did too.
I didn't want to. For years, I didn't want to return to Mercy Hospital because it reminded of so many friends that I lost.
That trauma, Benny had that trauma, and I wanted to capture that trauma because we have to tell these stories so that future people, so if those in the future can remember it, see it, smell it, be there with it. And
I thank you for telling these stories because there's a need, because really our community sometimes believes, oh, everything was just so wonderful because they were raised with all these privileges.
True, but ultimately every story is hopeful.
Oh, of course.
Every story at the end,
especially love stories.
Oh, especially love stories, and I'm a romantic at heart.
Okay.
And I think there's some romance in there, enough to make you grab your clutch your pearls just a little bit. But each one has hope, and each story is positive, and each one at the end, everybody just learns more about themselves and following their dreams. Because each one takes a big, bold step. Each character takes a leap of faith.
And it's interesting that you say that, because LGBT community is no different than other communities. We suffer the same things. So what you're writing for the LGBT community, you're also writing it for other communities.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
What do you want them to take away from? The same thing, right?
That we have the same struggles.
We do.
We all eat breakfast, lunch, dinner.
We all put our pants on the same way.
We all put our pants on the same way. We all dance when Madonna comes on.
Right.
So I mean, we have a lot of common threads, and the more we communicate, the more we understand. The more we communicate, the more that those common threads become a little stronger.
And the more we communicate, the more we understand. And I think that's a key thing right now, that people don't want to explain things. So people assume.
That's high five.
And that's, I think that happened today. I saw a prime example of it today. You're not only a writer, but you're also an activist. You've run for office. Tell us about what it is that you're doing outside in the community, also besides writing books.
Well, I work in healthcare communications for a health center here in South Florida, Care Resource Community Health Centers. I think working there aligns with my core values of serving, of service, of improving your community, making your community a healthier place. But service was instilled in my brothers and sisters. I'm one of 6, and there was a time right after 9/11 when my brother Sonny, he was in Afghanistan, or I think he was in the Philippines. My brother Derek, he was in Iraq.
Mm.
My brother Bobby, he was doing missionary work in Kosovo. And then later I was Peace Corps. But there was a time when all of us, my brothers and sisters, were someplace around the world all at once at the same time. And my mother, loved my mother, but she was, imagine having all your kids around the world doing something.
But that goes to show you what she taught you.
Service before self. Even, right now I belong to the Rotary Club of Miami, service. John F. Kennedy said it, poetically. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. But later he went on to say what we can do together,
right?
To heal the world.
and basically a life of service that you were taught.
But at the end of the day, too, I think you want to look in the mirror and know that your time on Earth was well spent. That you did all you can do. You showed up whenever you could. You were there for others when you could.
And that's great that you say that. But one of the things that constantly lately has been bothering me is that, are we leaving this a better place for tomorrow? And that's something that I struggle with, because there are times that I don't really think we're leaving it.
Sometimes I think that too. It's interesting. The Rotary Club of Miami, I'm on their scholarship committee. And every quarter we have all these amazing students come in, medical students, for a scholarship. And these kids are amazing, smart, they're saving the world. Their resumes are extraordinary. And after each one goes through the scholarship interview process, you say to yourself, the kids are okay.
Okay.
The kids are okay. They're okay. They get it together more than we think. And
I see it also that today's activist is not the same activist as it was before.
Yeah,
they're much well organized. They're independently organized. They don't really go with the organizations. They've created their own.
Not just in that way, but digitally.
Digitally,
it's quantitative data.
Yes.
It's measurable. So when these advocacy campaigns that are done online that can generate thousands of phone calls or letters or emails to a congressperson, that's done. So it can be done in real time. The power. I think what's interesting about this young generation is to realize the power that's in their hand with their phone, and that access to technology that allows them to improve our community in ways that we could never imagine.
I could have never imagined that having had a phone with a camera and being able to stream live as things were going on. In the past, I could have never thought about it. Now it's like at the
what's fun about that is in the book, chapter 5 is a more modern character, who's in Nantucket on an Uber, and he's like Ubering to his Airbnb. Right. So of course, chapter 5 is different than chapter 1 because there was no Uber or Airbnb in the 1890s. So it is interesting to see that technology shift. But also, again, researching the time, what music was popular. You'll find a character in chapter 2 who loved to dance around to Dusty Springfield.
Okay.
Random, right? But you're
Totally.
capturing era,
Right.
you know?
Setting it right on time.
Setting it right in time.
Oh, great.
So,
Well, we could sit here and discuss so much about you because there is so much to talk about you, but unfortunately we only have 30 minutes today, and but I always invite you to come back on your next book. And
let me plug my book.
Yes.
Let me plug my book, okay? All right, Tides Between Shores.
Okay.
It's on Amazon.
Okay.
Okay. And I go on to it right now. But and I want to thank recently as well, Unity Coalition and the Gathering Hotel. They had a book a moment for me to do a Q&A and read some of my book, and I'm very thankful for that. I think that was indicative of community coming together to help others in the community, to showcase, a new book, and that's people helping people.
And that's why we're here. And I invite you to come back on your next book, or if you ever want to, talk some more, let me know and bring you on.
Gabriel, appreciate you. Thank you.
You so much. On that note, we say goodbye to you for this episode. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your afternoon.